Thanks for staying with us. We're back here in Africa, now to Liberia, where it's just about a year to the country's general election. And many are wondering how prepared the West African country's Elections Commission is to handle the election accurately. The National Elections Commission has announced its plan to switch to biometric voter registration system. But watchers of Liberia's politics are expressing concern about the timing and what lack of expertise could do to having a smooth transition. Now, this would be the first time the NEC would be embarking on such an exercise. Liberia's 2017 election was not without complaints. Irregularities identified in the final registration roll included missing voter details, wrong polling places, and more. Now, these factors created controversies around the election. And joining me for a deeper look at Liberia's upcoming election and the level of acceptability of preparations towards it is the Vice President of the country, Jewel Howard-Taylor. Good to have you join us, Madam Vice President.
Thank you. It's a privilege for me, and I'm grateful.
Let me start by asking you, people always, joke. I've heard public servants joke about how when you're running for office, it really does seem pleasant, but when you get in, you realize that it is a lot of work. So let me just ask you, will you be running with the incumbent, Judge Ware? Is your name going to be on the ballot next year?
By the grace of God, because everything we do depends on God's own plans. By the grace of God, I believe I will be on the ballot with His Excellency President. We are in the 2023 elections.
All right, so how has the partnership worked? We've seen several stories about how the economy is faring, and then there's several criticisms of the president. People say he has failed to deal with corruption in the country, and that he has failed to also sanction about 3 officials who have been indicted for corruption. So how would you say that your partnership with him has worked? Do you think that Liberians will re-elect you?
Well, we've done as much as is humanly possible, considering 2 years of COVID, like every other country in the world. Liberia has its own challenges, but I believe we are focused on the gains that we have made. We'll continue to make those gains as we go into the 2023. And I believe if the Liberians look at what has happened over the last 3.5 years and look at our plans for the next 6 years, we will be re-elected.
You're confident, even with the current approval ratings that you have in Liberia. What would you say about your popularity at the moment?
I think, President, we are still the most popular president in the last 15 years. Everywhere you go, all of the young people still have hope in his leadership ability. And it's the young people that actually have the numbers. We're trying our best to cater to some of the needs that they have. And no government is free of challenges or criticisms. But I think, President, we are focused on the job at hand, building roads, making sure our healthcare systems are improved, making sure our educational systems are also improved to give better outcomes, learning outcomes for our children. And I think that's what he's interested in doing.
And to all intents and purposes, you inherited your ex-husband's political structure, and many people believe that that contributed to your win in 2017. Do you still have that structure in place, and do you think that it will work for you in 2023?
Politics is dynamic and changing. It's been almost 19 years since the MPP, the structure of the MPP with its standard bearer lost its seat in governance. But I believe over the past 19 years, we've worked, we've continued to remain relevant. We had many lawmakers, senators, and representatives in the governance structure. And so we've continued to grow and develop and change. We still carry that name, the National Patriotic Party, because it is the fire that drives those of us who are members of this party. And I think that is why we are still relevant today, and you can still see the MPP as a grassroots organization involved in these processes. We'll continue to work for the good of our people. Our motto says, above all else, the people. So it's not about the few, it's about the many. And so I think MPP will be a strategic force going into 2023, and we'll do our best to ensure that President Weah gets elected for his second term.
And it is not just, like you said, you hope that you're also going to be on the ballot. So as much as he's being scrutinized, you are also going to be scrutinized. Liberia is not without its fair share of civil conflict, as with almost every African country in the African continent. And in such conflicts, we know that women and young girls usually will bear the brunt of such civil conflict. What has been your role in empowering women and young girls who have been the ones bearing the brunt of that conflict?
You know, I've been in politics for the past 22 years. My work has always been women and children, whether providing scholarship opportunities from elementary school through the university, being a spokesperson for sexual and gender-based violence, being a mentor to young girls. This is what I've done, and this is what carries my heartbeat. And so I believe the work I have done only adds to the Jewel Howard-Taylor that I am. And I will continue to talk about the issues that are important, but not just talking, but making sure I can make some input in changing the dynamics. As a senator, I worked on some laws that created a better playing field for women and children, the inheritance laws, the laws that provided for domestic violence. And so there's a lot happening as a lawmaker that I was able to do to strengthen the systems that takes into consideration how women fare in post-conflict nations. But as vice president, I've continued that work. I've continued to be a mentor. I continue to provide support to education and to healthcare. I continue to provide support to sexual and gender-based violence. And I think it is that work that I've done over the past 20 years that enabled President George Weah to say, well, let's give Vice President Taylor a chance because she's worked with women and children, and we know that it is a heartbeat. And so going through the last 5 years, I've continued to do just that work, and I'm hoping that when we get elected, much more can be done.
And let's talk about the much more that can be done. And I am not sure how vocal you have been in terms of fighting corruption in Liberia. What more do you think should be done, especially because your government is now being criticized for not doing enough to fight corruption?
Well, I know we're working on the corruption court because the issue of corruption is persecution. And we think we need a court that will handle corruption cases faster. We've done an amendment to the Liberia Anti-Corruption Bill. We've given now the Anti-Corruption Commission the right to go directly to court in instances where they feel they have enough evidence. And most countries in our region have not done those things. So I believe we've done a lot in terms of setting a platform where corruption actually tackled. Because it's one thing to talk about corruption, is another thing to make sure that the cases that have been brought to the table are adjudicated and people are charged or released. So I think our government is doing as much as it can to provide additional. CC has direct access to the courts if cases come before them. And we're now trying to make sure that we have a specialized court that will deal with the issues of corruption.
Shouldn't it actually start with the government? What about the three government officials that have been indicted for corruption in your government? Is anything being done about that?
Well, the United States, which has its own jurisdiction over different things, they are considered the police of the world, have come up with these indictments. I think all of the officials have been informed. This is a process, again, we'll see how it goes. But again, there are many other instances that we're looking at. And I'm sure that the government will do its very best to ensure that where corruption lies, we are able to go to the rule of law. If someone is guilty, then they will be punished. And I think that's where we must go as upholders of the rule of law. We can't just arbitrarily say someone is innocent or guilty without going through a process. And I think this is the process that is now being taken over by the documents that we have received from the United States government. So they have a right to go to court or to try to exonerate themselves from the case as how they see it.
And we'll continue to follow developments on your fight against corruption in your country. But let me ask you, because this is now generating reactions within your country as well, especially preparations for the 2023 elections. We know that you are now coming up with, or the NEC, which is the National Elections Commission, has now announced plans to switch to biometric voter registration system. People believe that, or citizens believe that you do not have, or there is the expertise to go through with this plan. Isn't there yet, and that this could result to challenges in the election. What's your thought on that?
I think the biometric registration for voting is the most accurate one, because your thumbprint or your facial recognition or your iris from your eyes cannot be duplicated. When you have systems that continue to do paperwork for elections that can be duplicated, then there is a huge possibility of something going wrong. I think the biometric data registration that will take place soon is the best, because it provides one person, one vote. So I think it is timely for Liberia to move into the digital world and begin to utilize the systems that provide an environment where elections will be free, fair, and credible. And that's what we have embarked upon.
Madam Vice President, I don't want to let you go without asking you this question, because of how African countries, African leaders' view of the ICC. What's your thoughts on the ICC and the fact that a Nigerian has now been shortlisted as a registrar?
As a Pan-African, I think Africa has its own institutions, not saying that the ICC is not important to the legal process. Let me be clear about that. But I believe that we should also utilize the systems that we have at our level. There are local courts, there are regional courts, there's now an African Court of Justice. I think all of those steps should be utilized before we get to a level of the ICC. It is a part of the international process which can be utilized, but I think the process is leading to someone being sent to the ICC should exhaust all opportunities that we have on our continent.
Vice President of Liberia, Jewel Howard-Taylor, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you. I'm grateful.